Greetings, everyone. This is Tigrila Gardenia, interspecies researcher, biomimicry facilitator, coming to you live here from the 2018 Biennale di Architectura, so the Architecture Biennale in Venice. Well, I'm actually in Venice, but I'm in my room. I'm not outside, just because it's super loud out there. You know how busy Venice is. I just spent 2 days going to the Biennale of Architectura, so this architecture expo, which lasts 6 months. It's my first time going there, and I'm here with a good friend and business partner that he's been here several times. He's exhibited himself one of his buildings, so kind of the two contrasts, somebody who really has never seen the Biennale before and somebody who's seen it. And I wasn't really sure what to expect. You have pavilions that are of all the different nations. Then you have exhibit areas in the Arsenale that are specific architecture firms, companies, groups coming together to create things. And some of these are big, large concepts, and some of them are much smaller implementations. And the theme for this year is all about free space. And free space is something that I have been talking a lot about lately. This new business partner of mine has a project that's all around free space. So free space was a big piece of why we're here, why we wanted to come and listen to this. And architecture is something that over the years I've been really getting into. I guess I didn't really know how much I love architecture until I started working with the plant world and seeing the parallels between how important it is, the creation of space, and how the plant world uses and creates space. For those of you that are popping in and out, I'd love to hear who you are, so please write in the comments, say hello. I want this to be an interactive type space, an interactive free space. So as I was saying, the theme for this year is free space. And when we first got there, one of the first pavilions we went into was Spain, and Spain's entire theme was around what they're calling becoming. And I have to admit, to me, it was a giant cheat. Like that was the only word that came to my mind. It was a pavilion that everything was drawn on the walls. So there was large diagrams all around a central set of words that they had chosen, that were words that they feel are important in this new era that we are becoming. And all around was an huge empty space with these big words. And going through the various pavilions, you saw sort of copies of this. You saw areas where there was a lot of thinking and obviously creating a pavilion that represents your country, that represents the feeling of your country, that's going to be there for 6 months, that represents architecture, the built environment in your space. Of course, you have to think a lot about that. But I found lots of thinking and very little feeling. There was only a few pavilions that really got into, in my opinion, the essence for themselves of what does it mean to be in a free space. I mean, some people took it very literal. Free space is about having an openness for you to be able to create what you want. Some people took it more metaphorically and created different versions of it. I have to say, one of my favorite pavilions of all was, I believe it was, Greece had one called Amplifying Nature, which was really interesting. And then there was another one, which of course right now it eludes me as to which country it is. It's in my notes and I don't want to go fishing through my notes. But it was beautiful because it was kind of like a children's playground. And so you walked in and there was a ping pong table and there was a carousel, like the ones you could play with. And on the walls, they had the sort of images of being in a courtyard of a house, of a building structure. So here you have this courtyard, you have the facades of all of the different buildings. And the interesting part was that they had little tiny containers where you can pick up a card and it gave you information about a game that you played as kids. So really about free space, about having the freedom to make up your games. They had a box ball and elastic rope that you jump on, and they had all kinds of things that don't require a lot. They just require space. And so the freedom to play like a child. And then on one facade was what it looks like. So you see windows of a building, balconies drawn. And on the other side, they had asked the children, and they had a video that was showing this, they had asked the children to sort of design on the facade what they would love to see. So some kids drew, you know, like green on the balconies to show the trees and, I mean, the plants. Others drew slides that connected the balcony or ladders. And on the roof of the side that was like the original, you had the antennas that go for cable TV or for internet access and things of that nature. And on the kids' side, there was everything you could imagine. Trees and rocket ships and all kinds of use of this space, like this free space that allows a child's imagination to flourish, and therefore they turn free space into everything, and they can turn it into anything at all. And I found this fascinating, like as a mental exercise of how freedom and free space really go together, and children see a free space as freedom that they have to do things. What I found, though, incredibly lacking, and I'm sure you're going to guess what it is, exactly, it's nature. Like, I was shocked to see how few of the pavilions and of the exhibits that I saw incorporated nature in any which way, shape, or form. I mean, they didn't incorporate it from a biomimetic perspective. They didn't talk at all about sustainability or these aspects, although I have to say the United States Pavilion, and I don't say it because of me, was extremely, like, how do I say, not controversial in a bad way, but I was shocked at how right on the money for what's happening in that country it was. I found it extremely interesting to see how they had talked about like energy consumption and how that affects it, and environmental, and like, for example, the land, the wall, the Mexico and US border wall that keeps wanting to be created, and how this wall would divide not just two countries and not just the small populations there, but ecosystems that don't know anything about boundaries. And so I found that was a really interesting way that they got into the conversation around about nature, like how something as simple as what seems like a wall would divide an ecosystem and destroy an ecosystem, and how that represents also how it's destroying an ecosystem to countries from the perspective of these relations. So I found that super interesting. Just like I found Egypt's exhibit extremely interesting too. They were talking about, you know, all the little free space, whatchamacallit, like stalls and illegal or black market trading that happens there, but that's their free space. And that's the way that they use it in all these markets that get created, and, you know, the different ways that your free space is even just your little wagon that you push around in order to have your free space and to sell your stuff. So I think there's some really interesting perspectives. And the one that had, though, that really touched on the nature aspect in a way that was, I think, stunning, one of the few uses of video that I really enjoyed. I found that video was used for everything, and I found it really distracting, to be honest. Way too much video used. But I found Italy's exhibit to be absolutely fascinating. Italy's exhibit went in and talked about the land and the kind of freedom that you get in nature. I didn't like kind of the commercial aspect that they tried to push into it, which is, I mean, living in Italy, I understand that here the forests are something that are really managed. But I was shocked to see a little bit how they brought in that aspect of like the freedom and the free space we have in nature, and how if we look to nature, we see how to use free space. And I thought that was an argument that pretty much almost nobody used. I mean, yeah, there was a few little pieces. Like, I was surprised that the United Emirates actually had some, the Arab Emirates had some parts about the importance of nature in the creation of free space. And there was a few other exhibits, like there was some interesting exhibit about how bringing nature into, for example, the New York, and how some of the border around Manhattan with the water line coming in. And so there were some little aspects here and there, but I was just really shocked to see that this entire architectural focused pavilions are not talking about the need to really, you know, incorporate nature, and how nature uses free space, and how we can learn from how nature uses free space. So I found that completely lacking, and quite surprisingly so. So overall, I didn't get to see the entire Biennale. We were only here for 2 days. We're leaving today, and so didn't really get to see everything, but did get to see a really nice big chunk. Got to see the whole Arsenale today, and we got to see about 3/4 of the main garden. And like I said, FREESPACE. FREESPACE makes me think. We spent a long time talking about what makes you feel free. What is free space, and what is the difference between freedom and free space, and how does nature create and use free space? So there you go. 3 questions for you guys. I want to know, what is free space? Like, what makes a space free, and what is it that you feel inside of a free space? What are the elements of free space? And what is it that you feel you need in order to have free space? Maybe free space is just the space right around you for some people. Maybe free space instead has to be something big enough. So that's one question. What is free space? Question number 2. What is the difference or the similarities between free space and freedom? In other words, does free space lead to freedom? Does freedom lead to seeing things as free space? Is there a relationship between freedom and free space? These are my questions. And the third question is, how does nature create or use free space? So 3 questions for you. This is Tigrila Gardenia, interspecies researcher, biomimicry facilitator, communications consultant, here signing off from the Biennale di Architettura in Venice, Italy. Have a beautiful, beautiful rest of your weekend.